You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello and welcome to Creating Active Lives. I'm really pleased to welcome back Claire Jones from Your One Life Healthy Weight Solutions, because we talked before about the importance of a realistic and a sustainable approach to the way we eat, the way we move, the way we exercise, in both losing weight and maintaining weight. And this is the thing, we kind of all about ditching the diet. But this time, and a timely one coming up to the Christmas period, is we're talking about healthy holiday habits and why denial, deprivation diets are actually not the way to go, which I'm sure you'll all be really pleased about. We are going to follow this up in January with an episode about getting back on track, because, you know, with the best will in the world, this may well be a period where, you know, some of our habits not necessarily fall away, but just become a little bit less habitual, shall we say. So we will be following up with ideas and suggestions for getting back on track and creating new healthy habits in the new year as well. Just briefly then, Claire is a multi-award winning sustainable weight loss coach. She's a mentor, a therapist, a speaker and author of the popular book How to Eat Less, which is really good. You can get that on Amazon. But you've got a very wide career background, and I'll make sure that it's in the information, but it's from your own perspective. It was years of yo-yo dieting that made you think, hang on a minute, there's got to be a better way. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. Yeah, so I, as many teenage girls, went on my first diet at around about age 13, and that just kind of set the scene then for the next 25 years of, you know, just either being on a diet, losing weight, or putting it on, and never being in this position where my weight was stable and that I had, you know, a positive relationship with food. Food was to be controlled. Food was good and bad. Food was, you know, very much that kind of, you know, tool to use to sort of cope with life's ups and downs. It was also, you know, had a role in obviously celebrations and all of that. You know, everything kind of revolved around food. You know, anytime it was some kind of special occasion, it's like, what are we going to eat? You know, yeah. And my whole day was, you know, a lot of the time consumed with, you know, what I was going to eat that day. And eventually, after many years of kind of struggling with my weight, I reached a point where I realised how much of an impact it was having on my health. And also, having had a career within the NHS as a senior manager and doing various different roles, as well as a stint as a prison officer and a drug and alcohol worker, and seeing what happens when we don't look after our health, I started to become very well aware of my own mortality and the limitations I was putting on my life by the lifestyle I was leading, and that actually I had the power to change it. And so bit by bit I did, and over the next sort of 5 years I completely overhauled my lifestyle. So that was sort of 2006 to 2011, and since then I then found that I was actually able to manage my weight well. I wasn't going up and down like a yo-yo anymore. And then it was a few years after that, I kind of thought, do you know what? I've achieved something here that not many people do, because most people, the statistics show us that most people who lose weight will regain it within 5 years. Yep. And unless we do something different, and unless we as long as we don't return to our old habits, because all the time when we think about losing weight, we're thinking of a temporary solution. Whereas what we really need to do is fundamentally change our whole lifestyle to one that actually we want to lead. Because let's face it, when we go on a diet, we don't really want to be on a diet. No. we don't want to eat less. We do it because there's an end result in mind. But once we've achieved that end result, and even if we manage to get that far, we will return back to our old habits unless we fundamentally change something inside us that means that we don't. And that's the work that I do with people, really. Is work in that space.
What you said about, you know, people regaining the weight, it is a scary number. It is around 98% of people who lose a significant amount of weight will regain it and more within 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. And that was me.
So, yeah.
That was me.
I always think of it, it's a bit like, you go on holiday for 2 weeks and you do everything differently for 2 weeks, but then you go straight back to what you were doing before. And diets are like holidays, is that they're a very short break from the norm, but it's the norm that's caused the problem in the first place. So whereas the holiday may make you feel much more rested and less stressed and things like that, if you go back into your normal everyday life, all those emotions come back. It's the same with dieting. Diets work while you're on them, but the minute you stop and go back to what was the problem in the first place, the weight will come back on. And this is what you're about. You're not about dieting or denying yourself or deprivation or saying this food's bad and this food must never have this. You're not about the shouldn't, mustn't, don't. You're all about, do you know what? Life's for living. Let's enjoy our food, because actually when you're allowed to enjoy food, I think you take the pressure off.
Yeah. And I often talk with my clients and with my audience generally about, the sort of like the extremes of like, we're kind of encouraged to eat this perfectly healthy diet at one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've been bombarded with unhealthy food constantly.
Yes.
and so we kind of feel we got to be either, one extreme or the other, where actually there's this huge space in between that we can move within and gradually move ourselves towards, rather than thinking we've got to fix everything overnight. Because another problem with when we decide that we want to go on a diet is we tend to try and change everything all at once, which is very stressful and uncomfortable. And of course, if we're already busy and stressed and perhaps not particularly liking the food that we need to eat when we are on a diet, we're not going to sustain that. As soon as something happens, as soon as a life event happens or things get more stressful, it's the first thing to go. And then we end up back where we started.
And talking of life events, we've got a big Christmas, New Year, festive, whatever you want to call it, but we have this holiday season coming up. And it is a season of indulgence, and for a lot of people, overindulgence. And one thing you mentioned about advertising and things and marketing, you have to bear in mind that people don't advertise chocolate and alcohol and crisps and things for information. They advertise them because they want to sell them and make money. So it's kind of stepping away from that sort of thing. But this is a time, particularly around Christmas, is where people are kind of, a couple of chocolates won't hurt, or I can have a glass of sherry for breakfast, and Christmas calories don't count. It's Christmas, let's enjoy ourselves. But the problem is, we know that the average weight gain over Christmas is between 2 and 4 pounds.
Yeah, and
for a lot of people, they don't lose that.
Yeah, and with the people that I work with, and certainly my own experience, it could be up to a stone between the beginning of November and the end of December, because a lot of people will buy the Christmas stuff and eat it before Christmas and then buy it again, because we're being manipulated constantly by the the food industry, which is makes it even harder than ever. It's a big problem. And for me, for many years, I was absolutely terrified of how I was going to manage myself over Christmas. And every year the same thing would happen. I would just go into it with, thinking, right, I'm going to be okay this year. And then as soon as I was confronted with all the temptations, I would just overindulge every day. And then the inevitable January would happen, where I would just feel so disgusted and upset with myself, and actually, the whole Christmas period, I would feel, on the one hand, I was enjoying the food and drink, but I wasn't enjoying how it was making me feel. And you get stuck in this conflict and feel completely powerless to do anything about it. But thankfully, that all changed for me, and that's no longer the case anymore.
So how... A lot of the people listening are going to be like, oh, yeah, that's me. Buy the food, eat it, buy it again because, I've eaten it. How do we create and maintain healthy habits while still enjoying ourselves?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, we need to understand what's going on underneath the surface, because at the end of the day, we have to recognise that our desire for food is part of our survival instincts.
Yeah.
And the food manufacturers and retailers know this. So they manipulate us with the marketing, and to the point where we think deep down without realizing it at a conscious level, that if we don't eat that right there and then, we'll never be able to eat it ever again. Which we know at a conscious level is nonsense. So the first thing that I started to kind of do for myself was step into that space of like, logically, is that true? Because I could eat a mince pie anytime I like, really. You know, they are available. You don't have to eat them at Christmas. They're much more available at Christmas. But actually, you know, also thinking about that mince pie, what's going to happen if I don't eat that mince pie? Will I die if I don't eat that mince pie? Because my deep down, my primitive instincts think I will. But consciously, in 5 minutes' time, my life is going to be no different, no better or worse for having had that mince pie or not. You know, It's a momentary experience. It doesn't last. So I started to become more aware of this and starting to really challenge my beliefs around food and drink at Christmas. And actually, I'll enjoy it if I eat it, but nothing bad is going to happen if I don't.
And I think that's a really important thing, isn't it? Is the power of delay is right. Okay, you know, actually, will I still want this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour? And sometimes going off and distracting yourself and delaying it, actually you override that. I need to have this mince pie now, or I will, you know, bad things will happen. And sometimes you think, actually, I don't really want it after all. And this is where I think that would be my first tip for everybody is delay and distract. Do something completely absorbing, and then if it's going mince pie, maybe have a small one, have a mini version, because there are plenty of those around. So you get the satisfaction from it, but not, you know, probably only a quarter of the calories.
Absolutely.
But I think
so. I mean, that the first thing that I would say to anyone looking at, you know, Christmas food and drink is don't deny yourself anything that you actually want. Because it's okay to have whatever you want at Christmas. No food should be demonized. No food is good or bad. Nutritionally, you're probably not going to be, you know, hitting all the buttons over Christmas, and that's okay. It's a couple of weeks of the year, you know, but just make sure that when you eat something, you're actually hungry. And if you're not hungry, come back when you are. And then you can have whatever it is that you were thinking that you were going to have. And the other thing that goes very much hand in hand with this is eat it nice and slowly and pay attention to when it stops being so enjoyable, because that is the time to stop. When it stops being so enjoyable, because I have this thing which I call the law of diminishing taste. So when we take that very first mouthful of something that's highly desirable, it is off the scale tasty and it hits all those buttons. But the more we eat of something, the less enjoyable it becomes. So if you imagine a graph where, you know, that first bite, which is very close to the line on the left sort of vertical axis of that graph, and then there's like a curve where it kind of you know starts to go down as time goes on, and the more you've eaten of something, the less enjoyable it starts to be. And then it gets to the point where it's just okay, and actually having another mouthful is is actually going to potentially make you start feeling worse, or, you know, and sickly or full, or, you know, and starting to think, how am I going to feel if I carry on eating this? How am I going to feel in 20 minutes time?
Yeah,
because that's how long it takes for the brain to catch up with, you know, whether we've had enough. So it's about sort of using our own inbuilt kind of mechanisms and paying attention to what's going on inside our bodies, so that we can start to raise our awareness about when is the right time to eat, and when is the right time to stop eating, and don't judge yourself for the choice of food.
That's it. But it's the one thing as well is eat slowly, because actually you will then be much more aware of the point where you think, actually, I've had enough. And despite what you might have been taught in your childhood, it is okay to leave something on your plate.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've had enough, and most children, most dogs will stop when they've had enough. But we teach ourselves, we teach people to overeat. You finish what's on your plate when what's on their plate may well be a big helping when actually you only wanted a small one.
Exactly.
So I think that eat slowly and really
appreciate
it's like
it.
anything, isn't it? It's
really appreciate it. Yeah.
It's enjoying everything. I'm enjoying the taste, I'm enjoying the texture. But at the point where you think, actually, it's a little bit cloying now. It's a little bit,
it.
that's the point to stop, because like anything else, we're born with this ability, but we lose it over time. And so it's getting back in tune, isn't it, with what hunger actually feels like, but also when you've had enough, because that moment is kind of like, I've had enough now. And the more you do it, the more it becomes an automatic.
Exactly.
I'm one of these people, probably annoys people, but I'll, if I have fries or chips when I'm out, I'll eat a few and I'll leave the rest, because I've had enough. I don't need any more. I've satisfied whatever it was that I needed there.
Eating slowly is crucial.
That's something I've learnt to do. And now it's automatic, because I've really put the time into thinking about it and appreciating it and being aware, have I had enough? But like you say, it's thinking, how will I feel in 20 minutes or later if I overeat this rather than eat enough? And that's a big thing, isn't it?
It takes a lot of energy initially to kind of really focus on that, but it starts to, like with anything we want to change, we have to focus on it a bit more to begin with, and that was certainly my approach years ago, was finish it everything, because it's so nice, but actually it's not that nice when you start feeling full. And this whole kind of message of finishing everything on your plate, that actually was quite an appropriate message years ago. It no longer is. In the world that we live in now, it is no longer appropriate to do that, because actually when you think about it, if we eat food that we don't need, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to get turned into fat, and it's actually going to cause us harm if we continue to eat food we don't need. So leaving it on your plate, putting it in the food waste, giving it to somebody else who does need it, all of those things are much better alternatives than eating it just because it's there.
Exactly. So slow down, but also delay and distract yourself. Just because it's there doesn't mean you're hungry. And we do have we have what I would call visual hunger, is we see something and think, oh yeah. For me, and this is where this podcast is predominantly about activity, but this is where activity could help. So going for a short walk, or doing 5 minutes of stretching, or just sort of mobilizing, or having a little game with the family, doing a game of Twister or something. That's always good for stretching and cardiovascular. But something like that can actually take your mind off it to the point where you forget about it. And this is where, again, I think that sort of delay, that distraction is, you can use a brisk walk or activity as that, and it will help you.
Definitely. So, I often talk about don't feed the craving as well, because if we're feeding the craving with thoughts about the food, then we're just going to make the craving bigger. Whereas if we're actually doing something that intellectually occupies us, so going for the walk, but maybe listening to a podcast whilst you're going for the walk, or doing something that's stimulating your brain, which means that you're not feeding the craving, you're actually starving the craving. And the more you starve it, the smaller it will shrink. And I think that's kind of how that can be used, because if we exercise and we're still thinking about the food, then we may not stick to the exercise as long as we would if we're perhaps combining it with another activity.
It could be listening to a podcast. It could be doing a more of a nature treasure hunt with your kids. Get them to find 10 different leaves, and you have to identify them. It's anything that kind of, like you say, occupies your mind. A chat with a friend, something like that would be a good one. But it's really important that I think we start to be aware of the triggers, of the touch points that may well derail even the best of intentions. And one of those triggers, if you like, issues is, of course, alcohol.
Oh yes.
Again, a glass of wine, glass of fizz, a small sherry or something like that. It's all part and parcel of that sort of Christmas time. But it's calorific, but also it can derail the best of intentions, can't it?
Our resolve goes out the window. Same with anything, alcohol reduces our inhibitions for many things, and one of those is the intentions of not snacking, or not overindulging at meal times and what have you. And there's some really good reasons for that. And one of the things is that alcohol does, as well as obviously not having any nutritional value whatsoever, it and does contain calories, it is a poison. So our body will process the calories from alcohol first before it processes from anything else. And if we are thinking, oh, well, I want to go out for the evening, and so I've only got so many calories, so I'll just use that for alcohol. The problem with that is that our bodies are our blood sugar is going to drop, which means that we're going to get hungry. And of course, if our resolve has gone out the window, then it's really hard to resist that hunger. And that's when the late night snacking comes in. And of course, that is then going to potentially impact on the quality of our sleep that we have that night. And obviously, if we have also drunk enough to get a hangover, and for me, that's not very much at all, we'll wake up the next day feeling a bit rubbish, which is going to then impact on our food choices the next day as well. Because if we're tired and hungry, we reach for the stuff that we know isn't really as...
But also, alcohol can inhibit the release of energy from our cells, which means that, like you say, it affects our blood sugar. So we crave carbohydrates in order to get some energy. So it's the double whammy. And I know I very rarely drink now, very rarely. I mean, once, twice a year maybe. And I would say it's probably the single biggest positive factor in maintaining my weight. Because I don't, even though I wasn't drinking much, I don't get those carb cravings, and
it's the impact it has on our eating behaviours. And I think I know it's unrealistic for many people to say, don't drink alcohol over Christmas. I'm certainly going to be drinking alcohol over Christmas, but I always make sure I don't drink on an empty stomach, because I'm far more likely to maintain resolve over my behaviour if I've eaten as well as drunk, and not think I'm going to save calories for alcohol, because it kind of that's not helpful. And that means that I actually end up drinking less because I'm not filling up on the alcohol.
So with a meal or again, delay, a bit later, because it will help your liver, but also it means that those inhibition, or your intentions rather, are likely to be stronger, because you're not, I'll just have 1, 2, 3, 4 more. And I think that's an important one. Like you say, it's an enjoyable part of Christmas for people, but just think, okay, how is it going to impact on my overall, my habits, my intentions in the future? Will I regret it later? And I think once you get in the habit of asking yourself some of these simple questions, is actually, do I really want a drink, or is it because everybody else is having one?
Exactly.
Would I be better off with a really nice soft drink, or a non-alcoholic alternative? Some of the non-alcoholic wines and things out there now are really, really good. And so you get the feeling, don't you? You get all the feeling from it without the issues, and they're usually a bit lower calorie as well. So I think that's an important part, isn't it? Because it is it does reduce our inhibitions, our intentions, and that's something to bear in mind. Is the culmination of one drink, extra crisps, extra nuts, extra food, and things like that, isn't it? So what about activity? Because again, it's a time when I think people are all cozy, they're wrapped up inside, there's lots of good, there are some good things on television, and the temptation to sort of just stay in all warm and nice and snuggly kind of can really make people reduce their activity patterns. Plus, a lot of leisure centres and fitness facilities and gyms are closed. So how can people kind of maintain some sort of activity? Because again, that helps with the overall
absolutely. I mean, I can't, the way that I've sort of approached Christmas, well, for the last 11 years, it'd be 12 years, 13 years even, is that I kind of think it's a bit of a trade-off. And I think, and this is about thinking this at a very logical, rational way, and not in an emotional way, because what we mustn't do is think, oh, I've earned food, or exercise is a punishment. But if you kind of think, there's got to be a bit of a balance, and it's kind of, well, if I want to eat all of these things and I want to stay healthy and feel good, then I've got to balance it with some activity, because we are designed to move. I don't need to tell you that. you know that very well. And being sedentary is the worst thing that we can do. So if you're thinking, well, if I want to be able to enjoy all these things, and I want to feel good, and I want to get that balance, then what activity am I going to do each day that means that I'm going to feel good and not feel sluggish and rubbish and all of that? So the way that I see it is, just getting outside every day and doing something like we said earlier, just going for some kind of walk. And actually, although, you might look outside and go, oh, it's raining or it's really cold. When we've got the right clothes on, it doesn't matter, and actually walking in the rain and walking, a nice cold, when it's cold out there, can actually feel quite invigorating. And actually, if you think, oh, I've had a really nice meal and I've had a really nice walk and, done something, because walking is the best thing to support weight loss. I know we're not talking about weight loss here specifically, but walking has been proven to be the best exercise to support weight loss. Yeah. So why not do it over Christmas as well? When you're going to, perhaps benefit from it even more. And then, you can feel like, you're getting a good balance between perhaps doing things that are less healthy and doing something healthy to sort of help to counteract that. But as I say, as long as it's not seen as like, oh, I've earned my food now, or I'm doing this exercise because I was really naughty yesterday. It's getting away from that kind of mentality, but just seeing it as balance. Because if we continue to, eat unhealthy food, and then we're also supporting that with unhealthy activity, which is basically being sedentary all day long. If we can move, I know not everybody can, but if we can, then just getting up and about as often as possible, and not just spending all the time on the sofa or having lie-ins, because our bodies don't like that. And the less we do, the less we feel like doing. So if you're having that kind of feeling of, oh, I just don't feel like doing anything, it's like just taking that first step, because that first step will lead to another and another and another. And, I just sometimes, if I'm having that dilemma with myself, like, oh, I don't really feel like it, just do 5 minutes, because once you start, your chances are you'll do a lot more than 5 minutes.
You will carry on, yeah. And getting all bundled up to go out for a walk, again, is... Once you've done that, it's kind of like, well, we're all bundled up now, we're all wrapped up, we're all cozy, we might as well walk for a bit longer. And I think as well, as parents, create, particularly if you've got children or teenagers or whatever, create some sort of scavenger hunt or treasure hunt or something that encourages people to go out and move and make it fun. Have pre-plan it, and you can get... you can buy kind of scavenger hunt cards. I've got a set somewhere, which are really good. It's like find something red, find something green, find a large stone. And it'll involve younger kids. But if you've got lots of you around creating little teams that you can do it together, it means that you lose track of like, oh, we're out walking, and you just come back feeling that lovely warm glow.
Being outside is so good for... We're supposed to be outside at the end of the day, aren't we, as human beings?
And moving.
And moving. And the other thing, of course, is maybe thinking about the kind of Christmas gifts and doing things that involve activity. So the presents that arrive that kids want to play with, the ones that are going to get you up and moving, as opposed to the ones that you're going to be sitting down and just looking at.
And I think, it's something, get a couple of board games that do involve some, even if it's, the Pictionary type things, or at least you're standing up and moving, or good old charades, who knows?
Twisters are really good.
But all of these involve some sort of movement, and when people get excited and they get animated, they'll even if they're sat down, they'll move. And I think, and while you're doing these games, while you're enjoying yourself, you're not thinking about food.
Exactly.
You're actually just enjoying yourself.
And that's another crucial thing, actually, in terms of the switch that I made in my own life, and that I encourage people to do, is don't think of Christmas being all about the food and drink. See Christmas as about being who you're with and what you're doing, and the food and drink is the secondary importance.
Yeah.
So if we take our focus away from the food and drink, and just think that's just going to enhance the experience as opposed to being the experience.
That's it. And, I think there may be people out there that spend Christmas on their own, or parts of Christmas on their own. And again, it's think of things that you could do if you really don't want to be on your own, and circumstances mean you are. Look around for church groups or other groups that are holding Christmas lunches. See if you can go along and help, or you can be part of that. Or, plan to go for a walk. See if anybody is walking. If you notice people walking past your house, sort of, oh, can I come and walk with you type thing. Plan activities that mean that you're not just sat there for 24, 48 hours eating and drinking on your own, because it's very difficult to monitor sometimes when you're completely on your own. But I think planning other activities or phone calls or whatever can help to
think ahead. And also, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to think about, in years gone by, what has made them vulnerable at Christmas in terms of overindulging, what's perhaps led to the overindulging that they perhaps didn't want to do. It's fine if you want to overindulge and you're quite happy with the consequences of that, that's no issue. But if you are someone who knows that you overindulge without meaning to, and then you hate how that makes you feel, then it's about reflecting back on what happened, what you've done previously, because our past behaviour is a good indicator of what we're likely to do in the future unless we do something different. So it's about understanding what our triggers are, what situations do we find ourselves in that we know we're going to find difficult, and actually start putting in some plans around those to make sure that we catch ourselves before we go down that road. So having strategies in place to prevent things from going a bit pear-shaped, because prevention is always better than cure, of course.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, that is like, for me, I know that I love to put my hand in the tub of celebrations, so I don't leave it lying around. Because one thing that I think is quite a shock for people to appreciate is that if you imagine 5 celebrations or heroes or Quality Street or roses is the equivalent of 1 regular chocolate bar.
Yeah, I see.
Just
we don't
5.
think of it
and
like
it's
that,
easy to munch through 10 of those in no time at all, isn't it? So
but this is the thing, isn't it? And it's easy, as you say, just to sort of munch 5, 10, even 15 and suddenly think, gosh, that's actually almost the equivalent of a meal, or probably more than a meal for a lot of people. And it's the mindless snacking, isn't it? And I would say, if you're going to have them, get your 5, put them in a bowl, and take them away from the rest of the tub, and then eat them slowly. Again, eat them slowly. Really enjoy every single mouthful, because that's going to slow you down. And also, you'll be much more aware of thinking, that was nice, I don't need any more. You might even find you don't want the 5th one or the 4th one, because you think, no, I've had enough now, I've savoured it, and it's that slowing down. So what would be your 5 top tips for maintaining the balance over Christmas? Not kind of, giving up all the indulgences, but maintaining balance.
Yeah. So I think the first one really is about just whatever you want to eat. Don't put any restrictions and think of any food as good or bad or naughty. Just think, it's Christmas, I'm going to want to eat whatever I love, because food is meant to be enjoyed, and I say don't waste a single calorie on food you don't like is one of my kind of things that I say a lot, because if we eat food we don't like, we're not going to sustain efforts. So first of all, don't put any restrictions on what you want to eat. Make sure that you are hungry, physically hungry when you eat, and then you can have whatever you want with a clear conscience, because you need food. If we eat when we're not hungry, we're eating food we don't need, and the only thing that's going to happen if we eat food we don't need is we will gain weight. And if we don't want to gain weight, we really don't want to be eating food we don't need. So make sure we're hungry. Eat really slowly, really enjoy it, so that you can pay attention to that point where you stop when you've had enough before you end up overdoing it. If, say, you're, halfway through the best thing you've ever eaten and you're like, but I want to eat it all, fine, put it away and have it again later when you're feeling hungry. That's what I do. And a great example of this, I know it's not particularly Christmas related, but if I go for afternoon tea, I will spend the whole day eating the afternoon tea in bits, and then I'll finish the day having enjoyed the whole thing thoroughly, but without overindulging. And it's amazing because you get the best of both worlds. So it's really thinking about the food that you want to eat. There will need to be some decisions made, because we've got to put some sensible boundaries around what we're eating, because we can't just have everything we want in the quantities we want and not then have to deal with some weight gain. So it's about putting some limits and sensible boundaries around it. So perhaps just thinking out of all of the food and drink that you're likely to want to eat over Christmas, which are the ones that you absolutely don't want to miss out on, and make those the top ones, and then everything else can kind of fit around it if there's room. but then think about how can you get the balance of those foods over that festive period so that you don't end up overindulging in them. And this is where, being able to recognize when you've had enough is so important, because then you get the best of both worlds. You get to enjoy it. And why eat a food that is really nice when you're not hungry? Because you're not going to enjoy it anything like as much as you will when you're hungry. So and don't get too hungry. So there's this kind of like thing, I'm going to save myself for Christmas dinner. I'm going to starve myself all day and I'm going to save myself for Christmas dinner. The problem with that is that then we go into animal mode. And if we go into animal mode when we start eating, we will eat way too fast and we will eat way too much. And then we'll go, I didn't mean to eat that much. Whereas if we kind of think we aim for about a 7 out of 10 on the hunger scale, we can still maintain that rational control over what we're putting in our mouths. So don't be the dog at feeding time. Don't be the animals at the zoo at feeding time. Avoid that by, having maybe, if you're going out for a meal, what I often say to people is have a small snack about half an hour before you're due to look at the menu. Because then when you look at the menu, you're not going to be looking at it with that kind of like eyes bigger than your belly. Oh God, I want everything. And yeah, I was going to have the salad, but you know what? I really fancy having the mega burger with all the trimmings, and it's being able to maintain that rational control, because when it comes to food, as I said earlier, our desire for food sits within the primitive part of our brain. But if we want to manage our weight well at any time of the year, we need to learn how to make the decisions with the rational part of our brain and not allow that primitive part of our brain to take over. And when we get really hungry, that's when the primitive brain is really active. So we need to obviously try and manage that. And it takes time and practice, and don't be hard on yourself if you have a day that goes a bit pear-shaped. Just think, well, how did that happen? What can I learn from that and take that into the next day?
And we're going to be talking about that a bit more in part 2, which will be coming up in January. Claire, thank you so much. I would just add for me as well, go for mini versions of things because sometimes the mini version will be enough. If you eat it slowly at the right time, the mini version will just give you that satisfaction, that satiety. And get you into habits of saying, actually, I don't need the big one. The small one is
bigger is not better in this world. Bigger is not better. No,
it's not.
Yeah.
Claire, thank you so much. There's some really, really good advice there, and I think for people who do genuinely get worried about overindulging at Christmas, there are some simple little tricks there not tricks, but habits to just create and build that will mean that you enjoy what you want to enjoy without that kind of guilt or just feeling you've let yourself down, because that's not what it's about. It's about, let's enjoy ourselves. Let's not deprive ourselves or deny ourselves things, but let's think about what we really want. Like you say, think about what you really want. Don't waste the calories on foods that you don't really want. So we are going to come back, guys, in January and talk about what to do if things do go a little bit pear-shaped or awry. So thank you for now, Claire, and we will chat with you again in January. I will put your link. People can find you at Your One Life UK.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Your
hashtag is Your One Life
UK.
UK on everywhere, and I will make sure all the links are in there.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.